Here. Thank everyone for showing up to the Waste Management Committee meeting. I'm Earl Shepard, the chair of the Waste Management Committee. I have with me Dr. Virginia Jones, Ms. Susan Corbett, Merlene Ennis in her absence, Mr. David Hoyle, John McMichaels, and Mr. Lewis Walters are my members. I'd like for everyone to understand the committee purpose. This committee reviews management and treatment, storage, disposition of radioactive waste, including transuranic waste, low-level waste, mixed low-level waste, and radioactive liquid waste, and provides advice and recommendations to DOE on these activities. Principal goals of the committees are to see a trend in the reduction of the risk to the public, the workers, and the environment posed by these wastes, and integrated and comprehensive system approaches used when SRS waste management and disposition options. We also invite, who's ever online? James, do we have any attendees online? If they,
I do, but I don't have any names right now.
okay, well, we welcome them also. We have no pending recommendations at this time. We invite everybody to participate, but we also ask that you hold your major comments and recommendations from the public until all of our presentations are done with. We welcome all of our guests. Again, thank you for being here. There will be a public commenting period at the end of the meeting, near the end of the meeting, and we ask at that point in time that you address your concerns with the Waste Management Committee. And we were supposed to have an update with Ms. Sunny Blanco, but Ms. Jean Ridley will be giving us an update. And after Ms. Jean comes up with her update, we'll have a mercury and liquid waste system presentation by Mr. Richard Edwards, followed by committee discussion, public commenting time, and then that will be it. So in that order, Ms. Jean Ridley, would you come up, please, and give us your update?
Hi, thank you. Again, I'm Jean Ridley with the Department of Energy. I'm just going to basically cover the updates on the liquid waste and solid waste programs today. Our liquid waste contractor, Savannah River Remediation, is continuing to make progress at the Defense Waste Processing Facility. We have an annual goal of 156 canisters this year, and we poured and leak checked 87 cans to date. We are at 3,964 cans total. We have DWPF, which is Defense Waste Processing Facility. So if you hear me say DWPF, that's what that is currently suspended pending the resolution of the mercury issues and some operations issues. We have poured more than 15 million pounds of glass, and we're looking forward to here by the end, we hope by the end of the year, reading our 4,000 can mark. The total number of canisters we expect to produce over the life of the facility is 8,500, plus or minus. Okay. Next, the actinide removal process and modular caustic solvent side extraction unit. So I'm going to say an acronym for that. That's ARP-MCU. The interim salt processing unit, consisting of the ARP-MCU, continues to treat the salt solution, which represents 93% of the liquid waste currently in inventory. Our next generation solvent is achieving much higher levels of cesium removal than the original solvent. We now achieve almost 99.9% of removal of the cesium out of the salt stream, and that cesium goes into the canisters. We recently processed a record number of 261,975 gallons in a 31-day period through the ARP-MCU process. This year, we expect to process about 1 million gallons through ARP-MCU, and that material eventually, once it's decontaminated, the cesium goes to the canisters, but the salt portion goes to saltstone facility. We've now processed more than 5 million gallons since the facility became radioactive in 2008. It's also in a planned outage. We expect to resume later this month. On tank closures, the good news, we are pouring grout in tank 16. It started today. Those trucks will continue to pour grout for over about the next 3 months. We expect to be finished by September. Following tank 16, we'll begin grouting tank 12 with the planned closure date by May 31st of next year. And as most of y'all know, we agreed to the new closure date on tank 12 of May 31st through the dispute resolution process with South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control and the Environmental Protection Agency. We completed that process in April, and so we're now grouting tank 16 and we plan to grout tank 12. We are making the final preparations on tank 12 to get ready to start grouting. And we hope, in addition, for new salt treatment, there was a press release, I believe, that came out through it was actually through FedBizOps. Savannah River Remediation has sent an expression of interest to commercial vendors to pursue a commercial waste treatment type process in order to remove to help us with our salt processing capabilities. That expression of interest went out yesterday. And so we hope to hear something in a few weeks on that. That was also part of the agreement with South Carolina DHEC and EPA as part of that dispute resolution, that we would send out this expression of interest. Okay. Any questions for me? Yes, David.
You said that DWPF is currently suspended in operation because of a mercury problem. Is that also true for saltstone production?
Yes.
A couple other questions. Can this committee get a copy of the dispute resolution agreement?
Sure.
And when do you expect this expression of interest? What's the deadline for submittals for the expression of interest?
I believe it's, July 31st, I believe. Yeah, it's the end of July. You go to FedBizOps, it's posted there, but I believe it's the end of July is when those are due.
In terms of the next generation solvent that you're currently using, I know there was more than one version of next generation solvent. Can you clarify which type of next generation solvent you're currently using?
It's called the Max Calyx. That's correct, right? We had, I can't remember the first one's name, but it's called a Max Calyx. It's a, is it Bob? Okay. Yeah, Bob Calyx.
What you're using is Max Calyx, the most advanced version.
Did I get those backwards?
No, Max is the most advanced.
Yes. Yeah. Bob was the old version. Max is the new version. Yeah. I sometimes get into that.
Okay. There weren't more than one version of the Max?
There was a paid Calyx in the middle of that too somewhere, but
Yeah. And these are all obviously shorthand names, but yeah. There was one, an intermediate one, and then the Max Calix is the one we're using then.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Back to the expression of interest. Could you be more specific as far as what characteristics are we looking for in these companies?
We're looking for a commercial vendor, so it's already out there in the marketplace. An existing technology that can be utilized to help us process our salt.
Is there any understanding right now in terms of what's in the CSOA market for that? Because before going out, that's the logic, right? The logic would be having an understanding of what the existing degree of skill level.
Right.
What are your thoughts right now? What are the thoughts of
Yeah, actually, Savannah River Remediation has actually put out the expression of interest. They did do a market survey, I guess, this technology is available out there in the world. They use something, if I'm not mistaken, similar out at Fukushima in Japan to help clean up their contamination. So we think this technology is already out there. Although I think the expression of interest is open to different technologies, but that would have to be evaluated on whether or not it's applicable to our process. Okay.
Thank you.
One question. What's the status of small column ion exchange?
Right now, we're not just thinking about the big small column ion exchange. There's no plans for that big project. Now, we're hoping the expression of interest will give us something that will help us do similar type removal of the actinides from the salt, but it's not, depending on what they propose, it could be something similar to small column, but it's not the project that used to be called small column ion exchange.
Could we get a copy of the request for expression of interest?
Sure. Yeah.
It's on the web, so we could.
Give them the
link
website.
straight to it.
Okay, if we just get the URL for that, that would be fine.
Yeah.
Because what you'll find is an expression of interest, request for expression of interest, and then also actually a draft request for proposal is part of that as well. So there's actually quite a bit of detail for potential opportunities out there.
Is an assumption for that expression of interest that whatever treatment is done commercially is done on-site, or would salt waste be actually transported off-site for treatment?
No, this is on-site.
So it has to be on-site.
From my understanding,
Yeah,
we don't have any provisions to transport salt waste off-site.
One last question. What's the status of SDU 6?
It is completely formed up. The walls are up, all but the last section of roof is complete. And sometime this summer, later this month or next month, I can't remember the schedule, they will start the stress cabling on it. So it's progressing.
You could be putting an epoxy coating on the inside like you did with other SDUs?
Currently, that's in the plan, yes.
Thank you, Jim.
You're dismissed. Thank you. Before we go any further, I'd like to go around the table, starting with Ms. Nina, and introduce ourselves, just for the audience, please.
I'm Nina Spinelli on the cab.
I'm Louis Walters, yeah.
Susan Corbett, cab. Cindy Jones, cab.
John McMichael, Cab. Earl Shepherd, Cab.
David Hoyle, CAT.
Kelly O'Neill, with, for Cal's District 12, field representative.
I'm Phyllis Securico. I'm the acting federal coordinator for the cab.
Tina Watson, a Cabot District.
James Jenner, Cap 14.
Thank you all. Now we're at this point, where we're gonna have our speaker of the day, Mr. Richard Edwards. If you would, please come up.
Sure. No matter what.
No, just as long as we can see the slides.
Okay, so I'm Richard Edwards, and I'll be discussing mercury in the liquid waste system today. I'm with SRS Engineering, 30-some odd years of experience in the high-level waste world, both here and at Hanford. Let me go through this. So the purpose of the briefing, mercury isn't a new issue for us. Mercury's been in high-level waste at Savannah River for quite a while, since the early 60s. So it's been a consideration both from a hazards control point of view and also from a chemical processing point of view, because we have to deal with it in both venues. So it's not new. It's always been in our waste since the early 60s for quite some time, and I'll give you an origin and the description of why it's in our waste and where it came from. Relative to mercury, no exposures, no releases, and all the waste treatment complies with the requirements relative to mercury control. Now let me describe some of the things that have changed recently, and some of them are a little subtle. And I'll go through those a little bit in chronology here. January 7th this year, we saw a larger than expected amount of mercury collected from the 3H evaporator. So when we run the evaporator and you generate condensate off the evaporator, some of the mercury comes out and gets collected. We usually will collect in a 21-day period less than 1.3 liters. And in that 21-day period, during this time frame between December and January 7th, we got almost 6 liters. So that was kind of a surprise to us. And we saw higher quantities than we really were expecting. So we started looking into that issue. February 3rd, DOE requested that SRR conduct an evaluation of mercury throughout the entire liquid waste system. Had been looking at the issues around DWPF, where we actually take mercury out of the system, and had been looking at where it is accumulating and going to. So their recommendation was to take an integrated, holistic liquid waste system. Look at mercury as it goes throughout our entire system. In response to that, we formed a mercury program task team, that task team, in order to look at the entire liquid waste system and how mercury was moving and behaving throughout that system so that we understood. We were a little surprised by the higher amount of evaporators, some of the things relative to collecting it. Yeah. February 10th, so this is February 3rd. We also monitor the waste that goes to saltstone through the feed tank, and tank 50 is the million-gallon feed tank that goes to saltstone. So all feed to saltstone comes out of tank 50, goes over to saltstone, and we make it around that saltstone. So that's our low-level waste disposal waste. And in the fourth quarter 2014, and that was a sample we pull out of tank 50. We make grout out of it. We got an analysis back that said it was above where we wanted it to be from a control limit perspective. So that was a little bit of surprise. It wasn't much higher, but it was higher. We did not make any grout during that time frame, so that we didn't have any concerns about the saltstone material. And all subsequent samples, and now we've had a first quarter out of 2015 and a second quarter sample out of 2015. All of those have passed our control limit test. So no issues there, but a little bit of a surprise. So it's that evolution, trying to understand what was going on. We started a sample analysis program, and it started with tank 50. And so we sent samples to, there's a couple labs in the country that can do what's called speciation. mercury in there. Now I want you to tell me what chemical forms the mercury is in. And those labs can do that, but they are very limited. The one that we chose was in Washington State, so we have to ship it across the country. And there's a lot of special handling involved with that. But that showed us that there was an organic form of mercury in our waste at a level higher than we had expected. So our expectation and what we had seen in the past and what we had based all our analyses on was 1 part per million. What it showed was 50 parts per million. So just my analogy, just to get you grounded in parts per million, hopefully I don't make this too trite of an example, but if I had 1 million cars on the road in Atlanta, and if you've been to Atlanta, that's not a hard thing to not believe could happen. I would think that one of those 1 million cars in Atlanta would be a mercury. And all of a sudden, now I've got 50 mercury in Atlanta out of those 1 million cars. So we're not talking about, huge changes here, but nonetheless, it was a change. It's something we wanted to look at, and we were dealing with. I found a T-clip that was higher than it should have been, and higher than it has in the past. So out of that, we started looking at tank 50. We saw this methyl mercury, and since then, we've been sampling all the tanks and the feeds that would feed into the salt zone system, so we could understand the origin of a little bit higher level of monomethyl mercury. So I'll give you an overview of the new information, talk about near and long-term actions related to mercury. I guess I have. So mercury in the liquid waste system, and I'll need this one or two. So let's start at the origin. There were 2 canyons as part of this reactor with SRS. The H canyons primarily took care of the fuel out of the reactors. In order to dissolve the fuel in the 60s, they started using mercury as a catalyst. What does that mean? It just means that without it, the fuel took forever to dissolve. With it, it dissolved pretty quickly. So they were to add mercury in the separations facilities, and the mercury that was added essentially went to waste. So out of H canyon and in the H tank farm, that waste in the H tank farm contains significant quantities of mercury. In the other canyon, F canyon, very little use of mercury, so there was very little mercury in what we call Purex or the F canyon waste. So H canyon had the fuel, that had most of the fission products, that had the mercury, that also had some of the noble metals that we deal with. So that all went into the tank farm system. From the tank farm, you know that you process sludge, EMCF, process salt, through ARP and MCU, and take it to that which solvent we're using at MCU currently. And that generates the decontaminated material that goes to the salt zone facility. So let's trace where the mercury goes. So mercury came from the canyons, went into the waste. When it went into the waste, it stayed with the sludge. So it was not mercury like you would find in a thermometer. It's a solid particle of mercury, either as a hydroxide or an oxide. So it was actually a solid. It stayed with the sludge. And essentially, very little would be with the salt waste. So when it was with the sludge, it goes into DWPF. DWPF takes all the radionuclides, puts those in glass. The process of making glass excludes mercury. So the mercury does not end up in the glass product. No mercury is going to go to glass. Because the temperatures of the melter is way too hot for the mercury to stay there. DWPF has a mercury removal system, so the intent was, most of it's coming to DWPF, we would remove the mercury from the system in DWPF. Now we are having some problems with that removal system, so a lot of work has been going on over the last couple of years to resolve some of those issues. Some of them are chemistry related, some of them are equipment related. And the reason that has occurred is because if you go to the salt processing side of the flow sheet, very little mercury is going this way, and it's not your intent to put mercury in any significant quantity in the salt zone. So what have we been seeing relative to methyl mercury? We've been seeing increasing mercury content in the salt waste. So that methyl mercury is in the feed now. It's headed into saltstone, so 1 to 50 jump. So that's what we were interested in. So that's what has changed, is that we're seeing increased mercury in the salt waste components that we're taking through ARPMCU, making decontaminated salt solution, and that is now into saltstone. So where are we going? So some of this I've covered. Mercury, or just recap some of this. Mercury originated from decades of canyon processing. It aided reactor fuel dissolution. There's about 60 metric tons. Put that in English units, you're in the 130,000 pounds kind of range, just whole numbers here. It's not a new issue. We also, and I didn't talk about this on the prior diagram, but we do remove it through the evaporators, but it's not a significant quantity relative to the amount we need to remove. It is stripped and removed in DWPF. Early DWPF processes, the sludge batches actually stripped mercury out, sent it back to the canyons, and they reused it so that we didn't add anything new. And the effluent treatment, which is all the liquid discharges out of the high-level waste system, goes to the effluent treatment. It has double removal capability for mercury to make sure that mercury doesn't make it to the environment. We have been looking at mercury accumulation in the DWPF system. We spent quite a bit of time in 2014 sampling various vessels and locations for mercury to determine where it was going inside that process to make sure we could understand its behavior there. And we did identify that some of the mercury was going back to the tank farm, being recycled back to the tank farms. What that means is, when you send material into DWPF, you take the solid to make glass, and all the liquid, the water, goes back to the tank farm system. Some of that water is now contained in mercury. I've got 60 metric tons, and if I have a 20 like the high-level waste, we'd need to pull out about 55-gallon drum worth of mercury every year, just to give you an order of magnitude of how much that is. So it's about a gallon a week that we need to pull out of the system to get the mercury taken care of. So that's roughly 55-gallon drum every year. So that's not really new, but the issue is we're seeing higher concentrations in the H area waste, in part due to the fact that we process most of the F area waste. What's left is H area waste, which has the mercury, and we're also starting to recycle some of the mercury back into the tank farm. So that's generating a situation where we have higher concentrations in H area, and so everything we're doing from this point forward, we're dealing with the stuff that contains the mercury. So we have to be very cognizant of that when we move forward. This chemical form of mercury is also the new thing that's changing. Increases in soluble mercury, and also this organic mercury, which is methyl mercury. That compose the higher mercury concentrations compose challenges in the equipment area and potential flammability issues. There are some organic mercury compounds that represent a flammability concern, and to a lesser extent, grout performance and performance assessment are also challenges. From a near-term action, let me talk about some of the near-term actions. So methyl mercury was found, and that's the one that went from 1 to 50. So from a hazard perspective, what are the hazards of methyl mercury? So most of the mercury is a concern in the tank farm if it's elemental from a breathing point of view. You don't want to breathe elemental mercury. You don't want to breathe dimethyl mercury, which is another organic form of mercury. Methyl mercury, if it was on that table, it would be a solid, and you can think of it as table salt. If I stick it in water, it's going to dissolve, and you can't see it, yet it still behaves like a solid inside that water. So you can think of methyl mercury that way. But it is a skin hazard. So when we went back and said, we've got a a little higher concentration. We want to assess our IH controls. Are we doing the right thing from a worker protection point of view? We're extremely conservative relative to making sure we have all the controls in place for breathing hazards and elemental mercury and the other vapor forms of mercury. But we wanted to make sure that with a higher concentration of something that's a skin hazard, we have the right controls in place. So most of our rad work practices also protect from mercury. And we did training on methylmercury. We couldn't show and prove through vendors that the radiological work that was done with the gloves that you normally would use for rad work would protect you from contact with a solution that had methylmercury. So it's a precautionary measure. We used gloves that we knew, nitrile gloves that we knew would protect from methylmercury. And at the same time, we've now completed testing of the normal radiological work of the gloves and shown that methyl will not get through those gloves, so they're acceptable to use. So that was put in place that we're now taking off the table. There have been, talked about the increased frequency of mercury operators. We have taken, in the same way that we took a real deliberate approach relative to IH worker protection actions, we take a very deliberate approach to formal decision-making process to decide to resume facility operations following outage activities, even though it's just a small concentration change. And I alluded to the fact that as part of the mercury program team, a lot of additional sampling through the liquid waste system. We've sent a lot of samples to Washington State to try and understand speciation. So if I go backwards from tank 50, we've sampled many of the source tanks and ruled a number of them out as a source of methylmercury. So that investigation still continues, and a lot of sampling is going on in that way. So that sampling scheme is defined, it's prioritized, and it's in progress. Talked about the mercury program team, and the real emphasis here was to do an integrated system-wide evaluation, so that we clearly understood a couple things, and the key bullets up here are, what is the inventory, what's the chemical form, how does it behave as it goes through our facilities, do we clearly understand it, do we have any gaps, what are the impacts of mercury, especially related to workers and equipment, and we're going to have to pull out 55-gallon drum per year. Is the current system appropriate for that? What other options might we have in that venue that we need to attack? As part of the mercury program team in taking this longer-term look, we did establish a mercury expert advisory panel. The members are listed there. Dr. Lou Papachato, many folks know Lou. He's still living in this area, and he's a retired SRS, SRNL chemistry expert. Dr. Eric Pierce is an ORNL, Oak Ridge National Lab, mercury expert. It turns out we have an internal expert at AECOM in Texas, Mandy Richardson, who has a lot of experience with mercury and waste forms and T-clip testing and expertise. And we brought in a speciation and behavior expert, Dr. Eric Crespo, who lives in Washington State. They held their first review, the 13th and 14th. We got a couple key objectives we wanted them to review. We were especially interested in making them, or letting them review what our plans were in terms of sampling and understanding. They gave us the thumbs up on that. We asked them to review our chemistry side of the house. Are we correct relative to how we're treating the behavior of these substances? Are there any things that you would suggest or do different? They also gave us a thumbs up on that. And we're working through, in a long-term point of view, how do we address the overall mercury management and removal aspects as we help additional understanding. So, in summary, I'm sure you're gonna have questions. Mercury is throughout the liquid waste system. It's been there. It's not a new issue. We see elevated levels, but the elevated levels are on the salt supernatant processing side of our house, and they're elevated with respect to a little bit of methyl mercury. No risk to the public or environment. It does provide challenge relative to work, to liquid waste processing that I talked to. Worker safety is always a priority. Protection continues to be effective. We've taken very conservative actions relative to the new information we've got, and the long-term action plan is under development. Questions? Yes. You get the point, or do I?
Well, I got a couple of questions. I noticed that the waste treatment facility that you have, were there any upgrades needed to still meet the limits of the discharge at your waste treatment plant?
At the effluent treatment facility? No, we haven't seen any issues with taking mercury out of that effluent stream. That's been functioning very well. And when we did a series of structured reviews through all the parts of our process, part of that mercury program team, and the most comprehensive information is in mercury in the behavior through the chemical processes in that facility for the very reason of protecting the environment.
In my career, I'm in waste treatment, but we had a bout with TCBs early on in the year. And yes, I'm sorry, TCBs, I'm sorry. Does mercury act the same, like in the settling process of the sludge and staying in that sludge? What is the characteristics of it?
It's very finely dispersed in the sludge, even though it's heavy because it's hydroxide or an oxide. It doesn't settle through the sludge. Until you make it elemental, you can't really make it settle. And even when you make it elemental, it's hard to settle because the solids themselves are fairly viscous, thick, like ketchup. So even when it's elemental, it's hard to get it to settle. So it disperses pretty well in the sludge. DAPF pulls it out like oil. Same thing with water.
Thanks.
Those who are CAB. Just a couple of questions. Number 3, you indicate that there's no risk to the public or the environment. This is just generalization. But could you explain what the risk would be, hypothetically? Let's look at the other side. What would a risk be to determine what number for mercury exposure or mercury discovery would constitute a risk?
So a risk in that area would be something going somewhere you didn't want to let it go, right? So a release.
Would it be beyond that 50 to 1 million?
What?
Would it be beyond that 50 parts to a million? Would it be?
In the soluble side of the waste, the concentrations don't get much higher than a couple parts per 100 parts per million. So you're still a couple hundred cars out of a million cars. Again, all the controls that you have in place for radioactivity are there, present also, and contain the mercury from getting to the environment to the worker. So those controls are generally, or always more abounding in the tank farm situation. Does that help with?
It does. I just wanted to try to look at some numbers. A second question, and this has to do with my lack of knowledge in regards to it. You mentioned before that in the glass waste storage process, is that correct?
Right. Glass cannot contain the mercury because of the heat in the mouth.
Okay, and then that leads up to my question. Looking at potential improvements in technology going forward in terms of glass waste storage technology, is there potential that we'll be able to breach that gap, and be able to capture mercury that we're not capturing now in the class waste storage process. Potentially speaking, I'm not looking for any guarantee, but.
Anything's potentially possible. I would view that as very challenging.
Okay.
I think it was very challenging. You have to tie it up somehow. So that would be very hard to do. But certainly, as we look at options for this, all those values on the table, if we can find a smarter, better, faster way, we'll definitely pursue it. Does that help with?
Yeah.
How is the mercury disposed of? Would you utilize it?
Right now, it goes in, the evaporator mercury goes to solid waste, which goes to SRS, and there's an acceptable solid waste disposal method. And off-site vendor treats it to acceptable method. And I don't have the real details, probably answer the details. Generally, the accepted form is the sulfide form because it's incredibly insoluble, so a lot of them get details on it. We have an expert on our program team who's on that side of the house, so we're cognizant of that. David, you had a question?
Yeah, back on slide 2. Indicate that on February 3rd, you learned that samples from the fourth quarter, by fourth quarter, do you mean the calendar year or fiscal year?
Calendar year.
Calendar
So
year.
it was the last part of 2014.
Okay.
So
So samples you took in the last quarter of 2014 showed
the
elevated
results-
levels.
Yeah, the results coming back in early February.
Now, those samples came from what vessel?
Tank 50, the feed tank to saltstone. So every quarter on a calendar year basis, we take samples from tank 50, we make grout out of those, we let it cure for 28 days, we size reduce it, package it, particle, package it, send it to a certified T-CLIP laboratory, which is currently Southwest Research in Texas. They have a certain time period to perform the analysis, and then they come back with the T-CLIP results.
Okay, and the salt waste that's in tank 50 is not transferred to saltstone until you get those results back?
No, it's a it's a control. We maintain material balance controls on what's in tank 50 with actual limits on the mercury content. We move forward with feeding it, and then the sample is done during that quarter and reported on the results. But it's not a sample, wait on results, hold, and then feed it process.
Okay, so, and what specifically were the results? It says above, well, first of all, what's the TCLP limit for saltstone?
Our control limit is .025. That's what we've been controlling that process at. And
What's the permit limit?
Yeah, that's kind of a question that we may not want to get into, David. The permit, because I'll need the environmental folks to help me answer those questions. But our limit for controlling the process is .025. Obviously, it has to be under .2, because that's the hazardous characteristic. But we've been controlling it at .025, and I believe the value came back at .028. So it's just above .025. Typically, we're in the .01, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of values on the high side. This is the highest one we've seen ever. We've had a lot of time questioning the lab, making sure that we're anomalies, bringing in our experts who review their results and so forth, because we were concerned that there could have been a problem on the lab side. So we dug into that pretty deep, couldn't find a problem. Doesn't mean it wasn't one, we just couldn't find it. We did not for any grout in that time period where that sample didn't pass, which is an important distinction. So it was a concern to us because we could have, we didn't. So that's why we started diving pretty deep, and we need to understand it. Either something different about the mercury that caused the problem. If it was a vendor problem, then maybe it's a feed problem. So that caused us to dive into, well, let's look at the forms of mercury that are in that tank. Have they changed? What else has changed? How can I explain that anomalous result?
Okay, hey, Richard, let me, how about, so I listened to that very carefully as you explained that. The one piece of it that you didn't say is in the permit, there isn't a specific numeric value. It directs a particular treatment method, which is drowning operations. So that's what the permit does. And here's the treatment method you must use. We then have a control point that you don't give out as our controller.
Right, I understand what you're saying, but it also indicates that you may not put hazardous waste into a salt zone and the TCO feed limit.
Right, we couldn't
That
put,
is point 2.
we could never put anything above 0.2.
Right, okay. Thank you for that clarification. Your results indicated that you had monomethyl mercury. Were there any other species of methyl mercury?
There were a couple other, and I didn't talk about it, but back in the 2003 time frame, we did find dimethyl mercury. And all of our vapor IH protection measures are based on anything we see in the vapor space as mercury. We treat it as dimethyl because that's the most conservative position from a worker safety perspective. But we're still seeing dimethyl in the parts per billion range. So now, in my million car example, if I got 1,000 parts on a car, now I'm looking for, just parts on the car versus the car itself, kind of example. So most of the dimethyl is in the parts per billion range. It remains there. So we still are able to detect it in a very small quantity.
Thank you.
Did that help?
presume, yes, it does. I presume your analysis is trying to determine where introduction of organics is occurring to create methyl mercury, an organic form of mercury. That includes looking at your tank cleaning operations, such as use of oxalic acid.
The origins of the tanks, I don't think you need a methyl group, so oxalic isn't going to give you that methyl group to make methyl mercury. But if I go backwards from tank 50, things that feed tank 50 were MCU, and what feeds MCU, tank 49, tank 21, tank 22. So we've mapped it all the way back to those tanks, either EPF recycle. ETP sends a stream to tank 50. There's no methyl mercury there. So we've already ruled that one out. So we're going through that kind of systematically. So we have a kind of pretty diagram that shows going backwards, how do we trace it. Right now, it's in the feed prior to ARPMCU. It's coming through ARPMCU and ended up in the decontaminated salt. It's also present in either EPF recycle. So we're continuing that investigation, so I'm not at a point of drawing solid conclusions yet, but we're narrowing in on sources, put it that way.
Thank you. You experienced elevated levels in salt waste tank. Did you also experience elevated levels being received by ETP?
No, we have just started those sampling. I don't have the results back yet. So we did a suite of sampling around the evaporator. Those speciation results are not back yet. But ETP has some very thorough analyses of mercury, and we haven't seen anything out of the normal in terms of their normal set of analyses of mercury. So we don't have a has elevated mercury, but we're still doing that. Draw my box around 2H and look at where it goes in and where it comes out from methylene. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to understand when your analysis will be relatively complete. When we might maybe expect an update on your...
I would kind of anticipate that question. So I would, what we're targeting is a long-term plan that would be in the fall of this year, where we're heading.
This year?
Yeah, we've changed the attention to some near-term issues because of the discovery of the methylmercury. We're attacking those near-term issues first on a priority basis. So we've kind of put our long-term plan on hiatus and moved it out into the fall time. It also takes a considerable amount of time to get this mercury speciation done. Just the whole logistics of that, about a 4-week evolution. So if I pull sample today, I'll have results in 4 or 5 weeks. That's pretty much it will take some time to get results.
Thank you.
Jim Jones, what is speciation results? I don't know.
I'm sorry, that's the, if I've got all these different mercury compounds, I'm trying to figure out which mercury compound I have. So, mercury element, or is it mercury, has chloride or nitrate? What is my mercury form? Does that help at all? I was trying to think of a common analogy of that. I can't really. Colors of Tic Tacs or something. So it's Tic Tac, just what color?
Susan Corbett, CAB. So you said that this is coming from tank number 50, is that what you said? That's where it was first discovered, or that's where you first noticed the
That's where
blip?
you first noticed the increase in that.
And this tank obviously was the product of H. Canyon reprocessing, where mercury was used as the waste in that tank is the result of mercury being used in the reprocessing process in H. Canyon. Right.
Originated primarily from H. Canyon.
So we can anticipate that other tanks will have this process well.
Every tank in the tank farm has mercury to some extent.
Oh, do you think this is just a blip, or do you think we're going to continue to see high levels as we get further into the process?
That's what we're trying to figure out. We don't expect it to continue to go up and up, but we need to understand where is it being made, and do I need to either block its being made or find another way to mitigate its presence? Does that make sense?
No, because it's in the tank, right?
Not
How do you?
mercury, organic mercury, is what I was speaking about.
Not sure if I understand that. It's in the tank, right? It's part of the reprocessed waste. It was used to dissolve these veg fuels. It was in the system. And it didn't show up earlier because you were using different feeds of waste that didn't have as much mercury in the process. Is that what I'm understanding? Or I'm curious about why the blip with tank 50. What was different about that tank that you didn't see before?
So what we're seeing is all of the flood waste contains mercury.
Okay.
Very little of the salt waste contains mercury.
Okay.
So we're real cognizant of the fact that there's huge amounts of mercury, and most of it's in the sludge waste. Our trend is in the salt waste, we're seeing that mercury level increase. So we're trying to understand what's causing the increase in soluble part in the salt waste, which will eventually end up in tank 50 and then the salt zone. So that's the part that has changed that we're trying to understand.
Soluble.
Does that help?
Yes, it does. Okay. And so the DWPF is closed temporarily until you can resolve some of these mercury removal issues, though. That's what I have in both notes here. Is that correct?
DWPF has not come back out of their outage. There's a couple restraints on that. One of them is mercury.
So how do you anticipate resolving that? Are there some things you can share with us about how you think that might happen, or?
So we wanted to analyze, are there any impacts to DWPF as it gets product? So as solid waste is processed through NERP and MCU, you can see a stream, the cesium stream, and there's another actinide stream. We wanted to understand and analyze and complete that work, how much mercury, that may be organic mercury, is coming into DWPF. And so we've completed that analysis just recently. So the mercury part should be restraining DWPF anymore. There's a couple other items in DWPF that are currently restraining some. But we did want to make, I said this towards the one part of the talk, we wanted to make a very conscious and deliberate evaluation to ensure that before we resumed operations, we didn't see any issues with given this new information.
Yes, and you said that you're going to probably have to draw about a 55-gallon drum of mercury out a year. And what form was that again? What form of mercury?
That would be elemental.
Elemental mercury.
Out of elemental. Currently, that's how we pull it out.
And that is taken off-site for disposal or storage or whatever?
Right.
Where is the location, you know?
Yeah, that's the details that you were asking that I don't have. So it goes through the Savannah River Site Solid Waste Division. And it's a contract we have with them. They take the mercury and they send it.
SRS has a contract for disposal of hazardous waste of this type. So, periodically, whenever there's an accumulation from the liquid waste side, they transfer that over to SRS and they ship that off-site for treatment and disposal.
I have a question. The occurrence of organic mercury, or the experience of noting it, monitoring it, is the Savannah River plant the only facility in which that has occurred to the levels that we're looking at in terms of this ranching up from 1 part to a million to 50 per million? Is this, is there any other facility on the planet that is storing material in which we have organic mercury increasing at such levels?
I'm aware of any vast amount of mercury in the DOE complex at Oak Ridge. So they have a mercury issue. And so Eric Pierce, Dr. Pierce from Oak Ridge, we brought in. Hanford is the other fuel reprocessing, make glass facility. They use very little mercury. There's hardly any mercury in their waste. They didn't use it as a catalyst to dissolve fuels, so they present in small quantities. So, but certainly we maintain their processing. They're dealing with a tank farm processing operation, so we're
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Jim, is it possible that you guys could keep us up to date as things go on, please? Well, thank you. At this time, we have committee discussion. So, if anyone at the round table has anything that we need to discuss. All right, I see that there is none. We'll move on to public comment time. So, anybody? All right, I see that there's none. So, Tom?
Yeah, Tom Clement, Savannah Riverside Watch. This is not on the mercury issue. I appreciate the presentation and being careful about what's going on. It's a little unclear to me. I raised this at the CAB meeting in Savannah. If it's this committee or some other committee that would deal with the issue of renewing the position statement about spent fuel storage at the site that originally came up and was passed by the full CAB in July of 2013. It was renewed last year. It's my understanding that it to be renewed and to last another year, that that's supposed to come up at in July of this year when there's a full CAB meeting. So I don't know if anybody, CAB support staff or Earl, anybody could provide any information about what's happening with that position statement, which I would hope the CAB renews.
James, do you have any information?
Be put on the agenda for renewal discussion and voting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's at the next full CAB meeting, you mean?
Yeah.
It's not gonna be discussed at the committee level?
It's a position paper, so it went through executive committee first. It's a little different. But can we get that email out again to all the new CAB members who might not?
On the CAB website, and I can show you share the URL to everybody.
Okay.
Anyone else from the public? If not, meeting is adjourned. Yeah, Ms. Jean?
Just to answer your question, I got clarification. The mercury is disposed of offsite, as I said, either through Energy Solutions or Waste Control Specialist. Energy Solutions is in Utah and Waste Control Specialist is in Texas.
Thank you. That's a quick update. Again, anyone else in the public? No. Waste Management Committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending.
the nuclear materials committee meeting. I'd like to begin with introduction. I'm Virginia Jones, I'm vice chair. I'm substituting for Larry Powell. Larry Powell is one of our, he's chairperson. He's also one of our members who works full-time. And Elizabeth Hilton is not able to be here tonight. Other members are Andrew Bush, Larry Chavis, Don Gillis, David Hoyle, Daniel Kaminsky, and Chris Timmer. And just so you can identify us, we're going to go around the table and introduce ourselves again. I'm Don Gillis.
Dan Kaminsky.
David Hoyle.
And I'm Kelly O'Neill, I'm a field representative for Congressman Allen.
Lisa Kirko, I'm acting federal coordinator for CAP. Administrator.
James Shaner, CAP support team.
Okay, do we have anybody online tonight on conference call? If there's anybody who would like to sit at the table, so you can see the guys or hear better, please feel free to do so. I do want everybody to make note that the meetings are being recorded live. What you say is we'll go down on the record. And we also need you, if you're going to speak, to say your name, affiliation before you talk, and to speak loudly and clearly. During the meeting, we're going to keep to the agenda as much as possible. There will be a public comment period when other comments can be heard. If you want to answer questions or address the cast, please stand and again say your name and affiliation. And this way, the people online can hear you and know what you're saying. There's no public comment sign-up sheet. You can just ask for public comment at the end. There's a place where you can sign in as public, and we would like you to do that. We have one open recommendation concerning funding increases for processing materials at SRS. It was sponsored by Don and myself, and I want to take a minute to thank Don for her scientific writing of the language to help us get across what we wanted. Appreciate that. Jeannie started it. But we all work together. Part of our recommendation, one of our recommendations, number 322 at each meeting, the DOE point of contact is going to give a brief status update of ongoing SRS activities relevant to this committee's purpose. So Ms. Maxine Mexico can begin her short update. And again, if you would just hold your questions and comments until she finishes, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Right now, HCAN is continuing with its readiness assessments for the various stages of processing the spent nuclear fuel. These stages allow for us to purify and separate the uranium from the fission products. The uranium then goes on and will be downblended for use in a commercial reactor through the TVA reactors. And the waste materials will go through to the tank farm. These assessments are expected to continue until early fiscal year 2016. There's like 3 different assessments they're going through for each of the phases. Dissolution of the spent nuclear fuel is continuing. HCAN continues to work on modifications to allow receipt of the Canadian liquid target residue material. HB Line is working through modifications to the agitators to prevent reoccurrence of the event in March, where we lost power and we lost agitation. Once these modifications and safety documents are completed and approved, HB Line will continue to process plutonium for feed material from MOX. This is currently anticipated to be complete by the end of the summer, so we'll be able to start doing that again. K-Area continues destructive examinations of our 3013 plutonium containers to ensure the plutonium is being safely stored and continues to be safely stored. K-Area also supports shipment of the 3013 containers to HB Line for processing. And plutonium blend-down capability for non-MOXable materials is being implemented in K-Area. 235S has conducted a contractor readiness assessment, which would allow replacement of the glove box components in preparation to begin some of the risk reduction activities. Additional actions to ensure readiness are being completed prior to the start of work in cells 639. Randy gave you a presentation on that back in January, I believe, or April. Our DOE RA is supposed to start in July. LRA has completed startup testing for our newly installed fuel transfer system. This was the system we had to modify in order to receive the NRU NRX fuel from Canada. It was longer and heavier. So the startup is done. They're going through their readiness assessment activities to allow receipt of that fuel. LRA is preparing for the readiness assessment, and we continue to support fuel receipts from our SRS and the PRR, which are our foreign research reactors and our domestic research reactors. And we're also continuing our shipments to H. Canyon for processing. That's all we have.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, so we're going to move right into our presentation for tonight. Alan Gunter is here, and he's going to be presenting on K area overview update.
My name is Alan Gunter. I'm Senior Technical Representative for the Assistant Manager for Nuclear Material Stabilization. I'm going to give you an update on where we stand in K area as far as storage and the activities going on. Again, K area was one of the production reactors. It was the last one to be shut down in the early 90s. Actually, it went through a lot of restart. And that was one of the reasons that K area was chosen to be the plutonium storage facility. The whole idea there, we began in 1998. We completed the modifications in 2000. That was to support the de-inventory of the Rocky Flats Environmental Technology Site. It was ready in 2000. However, we didn't begin shipments until 2001. And it is one of our work plan items. And you can see where K area is listed here as CAMS. That was kind of more of our older thing, and now we just refer to it as K area materials area. And then the KISS, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is the K area interim surveillance area within the facility. Some of the acronyms, I will try to speak of again, 98 is the Department decided to consolidate non-pit plutonium from all over the complex to Savannah River. The reason it was chosen is because at that time Savannah River had been selected as the disposition site within the department of MOX and the immobilization facility at the time, which was later canceled. Some of the areas where they came from, again, I mentioned Rocky Flats Environmental Technology Site. That was the first one. That started in 2002, completed in around 2005. In 2007, the department decided to go ahead further with consolidation to bring material in from Hanford site, some from Los Alamos, and then material from Livermore National Laboratory to de-inventory them down to a quantity of plutonium less than a category 3. Again, kind of you see there some of the dates. We also have material under IEA safeguards. IEA is the International Atomic Energy Agency. There was approximately a metric ton both at Hanford and Rocky when we decided to consolidate. So once we brought it into the site, we placed it under IEA safeguards at that point. When we got closer to the capacity of K area, it was determined that there was a lot of space within the IEA area that we needed to fill up, so we placed roughly an additional metric ton of plutonium under the IEA safeguards. IEA material is under safeguards. It's streamed live to Vienna, both video cameras and alarms. And about once every quarter, they come in and actually will look at those materials to make sure everything's okay. And then once a year, they come in and do actually measurements on it to make sure that what we put in there, we haven't tampered with and haven't removed in it. This is a picture in 2000. What K area looked like once we had it cleaned out. This is the actual reactor vessel. These are if you look at these large, those are the cooling water. This is what we call the forest, and that's what held the control rods and the safety rods. Instead of taking it down because we were pressed for time, we just removed all the rods and we have locked that down onto the reactor. It actually has a seal on it that the Russians come once a year and inspect. make sure we aren't restarting. To an idea, the Russians think that we are less than a year away from restarting. We want to make that position prepared for the year before. This is more what it looks like now. We store in drums. K-area storage is basically a large warehouse. It's stored in what we call 9975 shipping containers, and these are from all various locations. Inside the 9975 is what we call a 3013 container, weighs about 25 to 30 pounds, 10 inches tall, 5 inches in diameter. There's one that fits in each of the 9975 shipping containers. The shipping container itself weighs about 400 pounds. It has two containment methods, right? One's right here, the 3013. This is a spacer. This is the first containment unit. This is the secondary containment unit. This is a lead shield, 4-inch lead shield. This is cane fiber board. We call it Solitex. And then you've got a drum, stainless steel drum on the outside. Of course, the lead is for shielding of personnel. This is both your thermal and your shock absorption capability, and then these, of course, are your containment vessels to make sure none of that material gets out. This container is not only certified by the department, but also by the NRC. We have an actual certificate of compliance on that from the NRC. We have expanded K-area storage. And in 2010, we initiated a project to expand the storage capacity in K. It was a joint effort between NNSA and EM. It was jointly funded. The reason we chose to expand it was at that point, the MOX program was on full board. And with the material that was going to be coming in to go to the MOX, we'll go through K-area for storage prior to going to the MOX facility. Phase 1 was completed in June of 2012. It came in about half the price we anticipated, so we initiated phase 2. It became operational in 2014, December of last year. And these two expansions together added an additional 2,500 storage positions. Maxine mentioned the structural examinations we did as part of the DOE standard 3013. In 1994, the Defense Board wrote a recommendation that the department needed to develop a storage standard for long-term storage, since much of our material was just sitting stagnant versus going through the process. Part of that, we wrote the DOE standard 3013 for long-term storage that material can be stored at least for 50 years without any incident. Part of that program, we saw the 3013 container that we developed. It's got two welded containers in it. Part of that also was you needed to do a surveillance program on the material to ensure that what you think was happening to the material was actually what was going on. So we began looking. There were two mechanisms for that would challenge the 3013. One was pressurization and one was corrosion. We were more concerned about pressurization. So after 3 years of packaging, we began doing non-destructive. We basically X-rayed and had the capability of determining the pressure based on lead deflection of the container. We performed about 40 per year. We completed that about 5 years ago. Where we were concerned with pressurization, we thought we could get up to 699 pounds per square inch inside the containers. We ended up with less than 30. So pressurization has not been an issue. The other one, like we talked about, was corrosion. And the concern there was we do have material that has salt and chlorides inside the material. So the determination was you didn't want it to begin too long because you wanted to give the material time enough that it was going to begin corroding. It would corrode the container. So we began 5 years after packaging, which was 2007. Started initially doing 15 DEs per year. We're currently performing 9. We also have a shelf life program at Los Alamos National Laboratory. They have a sample of every material sitting in K areas. They have those what we call small scale and large scale samples. What it is they have them stored where they can actually take gas pressure, they can take corrosion, look at corrosion, they do samples of the material. We compare our information that we get from our destructive examinations with the information coming from here to make sure both of them are telling us the same thing. If there's an anomaly between them, then we start asking questions about why. What's going on? Is there more moisture? Is there more whatever? We have had so far excellent comparative results between the Los Alamos and Savannah River. Basically, what we do, we puncture the can that two welding containers. We puncture between the first two cans to take a sample of the gas. That way it will tell us whether the inner can weld area is being breached or not. We then cut the cans open. We package the oxide in samples. We send it up to Savannah River National Laboratory. We also cut open the containers, the tops of the containers, where we would be seeing any corrosion. We send that up to the National Lab where they put it under microscopes and magnifying and verify it. We then, after we get through that, the material that's left over, we package it into containers and put it back into one of the vaults in K area. This is a inner can. Actually, that's a Rocky Flat inner can, and that's actually the plutonium oxide that's sitting in the container. This is an area where we have cut the can. You can see the outer can here. This is the inner can, and this is the cut it with. Basically, it's a pipe cutter that you just run it around and keep throwing it in, and it cuts the can. And again, this is where we dump out the material. We take samples. We take relative humidity in the material to verify what's going on. Again, like I said, we've seen less than 20 psi as far as pressure goes. We have no flammable mixtures of gas inside the container. That's because we have no oxygen. The oxygen is reabsorbed into the material. We do have hydrogen. We have seen some corrosion on the convenience can. It's usually up in the gas phase. The thought there is we are getting some hydrochloric acid in the gas phase that's attacking the container. It's not once it's challenging the container. Again, it's on the convenience can. We have seen a little bit on the inner can where the gas comes out of the convenience can. We have seen no condition that would challenge the container. Again, the outer container is the only one that we credit as far as the longevity of the container, and we are only seeing any corrosion that we're seeing is on the inner can. Right now, we will continue to perform all the examinations in K, and we're going to maintain the shelf life program in Los Alamos. And in summary, our assessment is we can safely store plutonium in K area. We're currently working on the storage conditions and safe storage. We have experience staff and facilities. One of the things that I did want to mention, Maxine mentioned that we began blending plutonium in HV lines 2 years ago in 2012 to disposition into WIP. And we have dispositioned some of that material. We have determined now we are in putting that capability in K area. We use the exact same glove box that we use for the interim surveillance program. Same people, same qualified people. We're currently revising the DSA, and we'll be going through a contractor readiness assessment later in this fiscal year or early next fiscal year. And then we will begin doing down blending of that material. It's a non-moxable material. It's material that's not suitable to mox. What we're trying to do is get an inventory of that material such that once WIP opens up, we'll be in a position then that we can begin shipping out to WIP to be able to disposition or de-inventory Savannah River on as expedited as we can. So that is going very well. Our thoughts are, since the material sits in K area, it's a lot easier disposition. And plus, doing the surveillances do not take up the entire year, so we can utilize the same people at no additional cost to the department. Questions?
David Hoyle, Cap. Alan, you described expansion of the K area storage facilities in phase 1 and phase 2. Can you give me some better idea on exactly how you achieved that expansion? Did you stack them higher, crowd them closer?
We actually took two areas. There's an area that we call the purification wing, which is the old reactor days where you purified the heavy water moderator for the reactor. We no longer use that area. There was a small area. There was an area in there that we basically did some D&D, sealed up a door penetration for security purposes, and we added about 800 positions in that area of the fleet. There was also another area that we call final storage area. Final storage, which is where the green reactor rods, when they were being weighed, they were right before they get charged to the reactor, they were stored in there. It's called final storage. That area had been D&D'd back in 2003 and 4 for a previous project, container surveillance and storage facility, so that's a big, large, open room. We took that facility, that area, which is adjacent to CAM, for the storage, area storage, connected them together so that the forklift could go in there, and we converted that into storage. They're all stored stacked three high, just like we saw earlier in the pictures. The final storage area gained us an additional 1,800 storage positions. Again, it was more to support at that point, the MOPS program. It also would support the non-proliferation program on retrieving material from around the world. But we converted both of those facilities, actually at a cost of less than $30 million. So we've done a storage capability for 2,500 positions is less than $30 million. And K area is one of the most secure facilities within the DOE company. It's the only one that met the 2005 design-based threat guidance, which is the highest threat guidance that we've had out.
Presume that includes keeping nuns out.
It does. We try to keep the nuns out as much as we can.
I say that flippantly, but I assume that you applied some lessons learned to K area from that incident.
Security. We had teams come down here and look at us. We have a team come usually once every 2 years, I think. We call it DEA. It's out of the Office of Safeguards and Security in Washington. They bring in some of the, as I call them, the ninjas from around the complex, some of the ex-military, special forces, and they test the systems to see if they can penetrate and if they can steal the material. And you have to full-blown what we call force and force exercise. So yes, we have went through all that, and we looked at some of the lower level areas. Everybody knows that some of the things that you're talking about, the nuns, some of the lower things we've actually started, been looking into this.
Hey, John, I'm just curious on talking about the self-examination of the containers. Did I read something where there's new technology being developed so that you're not going to have to destroy the container to analyze the contents as much, or a new invention out there?
We have, based on the results that we're actually seeing at Los Alamos and at Savannah River, we are now starting to more concentrate what we consider the problem. In other words, before we got a random program that looked at a program that gets a 99.95% with a probability that it'll be 5% of the worst containers in the store. It's kind of weird in this analysis, but it's one Los Alamos did for us. But what we've done is we started doing that, but then we started doing engineering judgments and started focusing where we were seeing any of the slight corrosion. So what we've determined is, and we just decided to use surveillance plan that concentrates our efforts down onto the material that we think the problem, or could be a problem. We really haven't come up with a technology that we cannot open the containers. Again, we do radiographs. Radiographs can tell me pressure. They can tell me if there's a foreign object in the material. They can tell me if I'm supposed to have oxide, but I got a chunk of metal. It can tell me things like that. It can't tell me if I've got corrosion, for instance, going on the inside of the can. The only way we know to do that is to actually destructively examine.
Dan Kaminsky, Cab. The added capacity was 2,500 units on phase 2. What's the total capacity and how much is available?
We have roughly 8,500 storage locations. And we probably have about 2,500 left over.
Okay. Could you go to slide 8? I had a question on that picture. So when were those pictures taken? Roughly? The only reason I ask is, okay, so it's dated for sure. The only reason I ask is because obviously you have a storage methodology, and then both the upper left picture, you have stray stuff just sort of accumulating in the corner, and then this one you've got random containers just sitting in the aisleway.
Okay.
Why would those be in the aisleway? Are those?
There may have been some that are planned to be doing destructive examinations where you've gone into the arrays.
So you're doing a statistical sampling where they're literally taking a specific one off a specific pallet?
Yeah,
Okay.
we actually run a computer program, and it may say, out of all these containers, it wants the one on the back side.
Yep. I'm familiar with that from normal storage.
That's where some of these area here, actually, we were talking about one of the storage, increased storage capacity. This is it. This is a verification area vault. Some of those drums, we had just received them, and we hadn't palletized them at that point. These right here, like I said, they were either potentially for, and I said it was done in 2000, this had to be 2012 because that's when we completed it. We were beginning to do the program, so that could have been materials being pulled out, getting ready to go to EV lines also for dissolution.
And the materials that you're doing the destructive sampling, are what's in that specific container, is that now going for processing, or is it returned to a new container, put back in storage?
Some of it has been dissolved and actually discarded to waste. Now we are holding it, we're putting it back in 9975, and that material is the first material that we began downblending to go with. Instead of dissolving it or anything else, we just downblend it now, package it, and have it ready to go with. And that's what the plans are as we continue to do destructive examinations. Even, give you an example, even the material that we do destructive that could go to MOX, we're going to go ahead and downblend it and get it ready to go to with.
So as you continue to destructively test these, your results, you're formulating new inspection criteria, frequency, quantities, all that sort of thing, right?
We see, like I said, we've narrowed instead of, the full population, the population is now down to about 450 to 460 containers that we're really concerned with now for the results of those things. Now, we are continue to pick random containers. Because again, we concentrate down to a certain point, but we want to make sure we haven't overlooked something.
Sure.
Okay, so Jenny Jones County. So you're using a combination of techniques. So you're doing a random approach, plus you're also doing a visual observation and selecting those that you feel more rust on. So you're using several techniques.
We have a test tool that we run, a statistic that tells us what containers. We then use also what we call engineering judgment. It's where our experts, along with Los Alamos, we have on the team, and and they're the ones that look at kind of the results of what we're seeing, and they may say, hey, this material over here has higher moisture, lower moisture, more fluoride, had a calcium fluoride versus potassium fluoride. And we're seeing more over here, let's pull one more out of that group. So it's the different techniques of how we're picking drums to go through the analysis on them. But every one we do a non-destructive examination, and then we take it on in and we cut it open and, do the visual.
Any more questions?
Go ahead, Dave.
I'm just kind of curious how you account for canisters that are inside that giant stack that looks to be about 50 deep by 7, at least 7 wide. How do you know what's on the inside of that stack?
Let's see if I can see it. I think right there. We have radio frequency, RFID, radio frequency tamper indicating device that we put on each of the pallets that looks through, and it will tell you whether somebody disturbed that pallet or not. So you measure it, you put a TID. It's got one TID, but then you put that what we call the RFID on there, and that RFID has is what talks to the system, and it pulls it like kind of several times per minute, and it will check to see if that thing is still saying it's got a good signal going through it. And we work through that. That's also what's on the IEA drums that actually stream live via the internet to Vienna. So if I went into the IEA area, which is not on here, and disturbed their drums, they would immediately get an alarm and be able to look at cameras to see what's going on if somebody's in there. And every so often we do have to do a physical inventory. But because we have the surveillance systems and all on here, the inventory frequency is much reduced.
Tom from Savannah Riverside Watch. Alan, if I can understand a little bit better the blend down program that may restart later in the year. Are you intending to take what's undergoing destructive analysis, and that's going to be the material that's blended down, and you're just going to keep up with that, 9 cans per year, or are you going back into the backlog of what's been undergone destructive examination since WIP closed, so you've got X number of convenience cans stored there? I'm a little unclear looking forward what would be there.
Yes. And yes, we've got all of the, I'll call it, destructive examination material that we've done since WIP closed. Since we quit blending an HB line in 2012, we've got that destructive examination material that we're going to be downloading. Any future, as we do the 9 cans per year, or actually we're going down to 6 beginning in this coming fiscal year, that material will be downloaded. I will also be taking, there's roughly 5 tons of material that's non-monthable that I will just be pulling out of the storage and downblending it. So it will be a full-blown downblend program that will be destructive examination backlog, future destructive examinations, and then material not suitable to go to MOCs because of either isotopic, chemical impurities, various reasons.
So this is all in the one glove box?
This is all in that one glove box. I do the destructive examination, and then whatever time we have after that, on a 1 shift, 4 days per week basis, we will then be doing the downblending, using the same people.
Okay, I'm not sure what the production rate is going to be there, but I'll leave that hanging. Will you go forward with this if it is still unclear? I think it's going to be unclear for a while, when WIP might reopen, and also not knowing what the priority of shipments to WIP might be once the facility gets back into startup?
Our assessment, yes. The answer to that is yes. 2 things. One, the material we're talking about here is the most well-characterized material in the company. It's in baked at 950 degrees hours. It has all the organic side of it. It has any reactive materials. It has very low moisture. So when you're doing the downblending, looking at what happened at WIP, this material does not have the organics or anything else that would cause any kind of initiation. So we are very confident. We talked with the people. We are very confident, even if they come up with a little more stringent criteria on inspection, we can meet it up here. As far as WIP, we recognize that when WIP restarts, we will not be first priority up on the list. We know Idaho and Los Alamos both are a higher priority within the DOE complex in Savannah River, because we've gotten rid of most of our legacy TRU waste to where they have not. Our goal here with this material, and it's a modest production rate, it's not going to be doing tons of plutonium a year, is to build up an inventory such that when WIP opens, and again, we're doing the non-MOX materials, that way it's devoid of a decision on MOX, whether you go forward with it, the different alternatives. We're doing material that's not suitable for MOX. We're putting in a condition that once WIP opens, once Savannah River can get into the priority system, then we have material that we can get out of the state of South Carolina on a reasonable basis.
Okay, if that blend down does happen later in the year, where would you store any containers, blended down containers that, on which safeguards have been kind of terminated?
We'll either store it in K area.
You might store it in K.
Some of it will be stored in K, but also stored in here, in the solid waste area.
So you would use some of those, positions that were mentioned earlier?
Yeah, actually, no, it's an area outside of the materials, kind of the secure area. It's outside, it's in the, we call it assembly basement. Once you down blend it, you don't have, to worry about the security like you do for the good, I'll call it the good material. So I've got areas outside of the material storage, we call it a material access area, that I can store some, and then we'll also be shipping it over to E area and putting it in some of the old culverts to be stored on the path out here, our solid waste area.
Would you anticipate that the material already over the area on which safeguards have been terminated, that stuff would go before you took any more blended down containers over onto that path, into the culverts?
We don't know that that'll be a priority. I think it'll be whatever depending on almost how it's the easiest to get to is what you're going to take out. I don't see any difference between what we've already blended down and the new stuff that we're blending down for use.
But you don't want to get a situation where if WIP stumbles, you've got a whole bunch more material stored over in here.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at that. We're working with solid waste. We will be adding material to the here. That's our concept.
Thank you.
What do you blend it, the plutonium with?
An inert material.
A lot of inert material, right? So how many WIP containers do you get from 13013 material? 13013.
It kind of depends on the 3013 range and how much material. I mean, they can hold. Some of them have as little because it's low density. It can have as little as 400 grams up to 4 kg. I mean, so it kind of depends. What you downblend to, based on what the containers we're using, is 300, what they call fissile gram equivalent, or basically 300 grams of plutonium. Is the maximum allowed in the container that we can put in there. The license that NRC has approved for the criticality container over that is 380 grams.
And that's what WIP allows, that much?
In that one container, yes. Because that's what the NRC has certified. Anything going to WIP has to be in an NRC certified container. So that's why we are using the criticality container. So if you had 3 kgs, let's just pick 3, then it would generate 10 containers to go to WIP.
But that's not certified to the WIP waste acceptance criteria.
Not in the WIP license at this point. You are correct. It's something that was getting ready to be added.
Just a reminder to say your name, please, before talking.
When they ask that. Anybody else?
Thank you, Alan. It's now time for committee discussion. During this time, we can talk about any concerns, any issues.
Sorry, Dan Kaminsky Cab. Just from a meeting minute standpoint, would it be possible to get like the last full CAB meeting minutes before our next subcommittee meeting? There's a lot of information that was spoken, and I don't know what's humanly possible for your group, but
It's not even.
It takes a couple weeks to get that turned around. Jesselyn does that in between doing other stuff.
Isn't it required before then, it's full board?
Full board,
The full-
for the full board, you're sure, right? Yeah, we did get that last time.
Give her about a week to do a 3-week job.
Is there anything specific on that?
No, it would just be a benefit to, because I know Jenny wasn't there, and jog memories exactly. I mean, I got notes, but not on every detail.
The new materials tour that's planned, do we know what's gonna be included in that tour at this point yet?
No, that was planned for September, I believe, yes, September. So we won't know anything until later this summer. We're just now working on July. Maxine, Max at DOE. Typically in the past, we tried to include all of our facilities, so L area, H Canyon, 235F, those are typically the facilities we try to hit. You probably get a drive-by at K area. Sorry.
Or no, no.
L area would be important.
L area will be there. Don't worry, Dawn. People want to see you.
Dan Kaminsky Cab. With that in mind, would it be possible in years future to pull that ahead so new cab members would have that firsthand experience sooner rather than later?
I think we probably could do that. We'll have to work with the CAP support team to do that. You would have to look at that.
I know it's relatively new.
It is important to see it.
Oh, sure. I'm a visual person.
Okay, it's now time for public comment. We're running ahead of schedule. Is there anybody from the public that would like to make a comment? You could say your name before you comment. Being no comment, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it.